Mr. Hastings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend, colleague, and fellow Floridian for yielding the time. I rise today in opposition to the rule for H.R. 2250. In my considered opinion, both these bills yet another effort by the Republican leadership to demonize the Environmental Protection Agency while doing nothing to create jobs for the millions of Americans who are unemployed. My colleague, Mr. Nugent, my friend, cited to the letter, the authors of same being Walter Minnick, Robert Adderholt, G.K. Butterfield, and John Shimkus. We expressed ourselves. I signed that letter. I was not the author of same. I would have, and I do not deny any of its particulars, specifically the fact that there should be flexible approaches to address the diversity of boiler operation sectors and fuels that could prevent severe job loss. I would remind my friend that the measure that we were speaking of is and therefore the implementation of the provision will continue, I believe, to allow for the needed flexibility. And I think you referred, and I refer again to the portion of the joint bipartisan letter. As EPA turns to developing a final Boiler Act rule, mind you, they had not, and this was as of August of this year, we hope you will carefully consider sustainable approaches that protect the environment and public health while fostering economic recovery and jobs within the bounds of the law. And that's precisely what I signed on to and stand by, and I don't believe it's inconsistent with anything that my friend pointed out, nor did he suggest that it would be inconsistent. But I did also hear my friend talk about Washington doublespeak, and I distinctly heard him refer to what has now kind of perpetuated itself inside this beltway, and that is the statement that was made earlier by the distinguished Speaker of the House of Representatives that at this moment the executive branch has 219 rules in the works that will cost our economy at least $100 million. That means under the current Washington agenda, our economy is poised to take a hit from government of at least $100 million. I would ask my colleague to not follow on that pattern. Otherwise, you get caught in the Washington Beltway doublespeak, and the better proof allows an analysis that was done by the Washington Post, and I'm not a follower necessarily of the Washington Post fact checker, but so far I've not heard anyone reference them when they do give people, they give Pinocchios for when something is not the truth, and it's either one Pinocchio, two, or three. And as it turns out, what the Washington Post said following the Speaker's comments that you have used here today, my dear friend, is that Mr. Boehner left the distinct impression that 219 new regulations were hanging like a sword of Damocles over the U.S. economy. But it turns out the number of potential regulations is inflated, as well as the potential impact. Overall, his statement contains significant factual errors, and they give it 3 Pinocchios. And I would urge that you not try to earn these Pinocchios that they're talking about, and let's try to get the facts straight. Just last week, we were having this very same discussion about a bill that made it easier for power plants to emit harmful mercury and other toxic pollutants into the air. Today, we're talking about letting industrial boilers and cement kilns do the same thing. Last week, I asked, why is it that certain ones can follow the standards and others can't? And I still am puzzled by that. I also asked last night, how it is if we don't know what the rules are going to look like, that we would be smiting down, or if there's such a word, the rules. Mr. Speaker, we're judged by what we do and not by what we say. And what my friends on the other side of the aisle continue to do is call up bills that are short-sighted and undermine our ability to maintain the public health and cleanliness of our air and water. Bills like these that destroy regulations protecting the air we breathe and the water we drink have the same consequences regardless of intent. Republicans cannot close their eyes to these effects and plead good intentions. I assure you, these effects are severe. Mercury is a powerful neurotoxin that does, in fact, hinder brain development in infants and children. Other toxic metals getting a pass under these bills are arsenic, chromium, and lead, which are known to cause cancer and birth defects. Despite these facts, my friends on the other side cling to their anti-regulatory dogma with fanatical fervor. I had a friend last night say to me that we have a conscience and brains, and others just think about dollar signs. And I feel that my colleagues who have brains, I believe have consciences, seem to place the dollar signs ahead of many of the practical matters that would benefit society. This anti-government rhetoric has gone so far as to lead my colleagues on the other side astray of the protocols laid out by Majority Leader Cantor. In the third protocol laid out in his legislative protocols for the 112th Congress, Leader Cantor writes, and I quote him, "Any bill or joint resolution authorizing discretionary appropriation shall specify the actual amount of funds being authorized. Authorization shall not utilize terms such as, quote, such sums as may be necessary, unquote, or similar language that fails to specify the actual amount of funding being authorized. Yet neither of these bills specifies how much money is authorized for implementation of the bill, leaving the cost a mystery. Furthermore, ambiguous language in these bills will create legal uncertainty and ensure litigation. And since these bills don't specify how much they cost, neither bill contains an offset for the cost. These bills also defy Leader Cantor's fourth protocol that we know around here as cut-go. There will be a real cost for the EPA to take on another lengthy rule creation process, but my friends on the other side have chosen to ignore this contradiction. Mr. Speaker, these bills are not just bureaucratic infighting. They will have real and measurable effects. According to EPA's analysis, H.R. 2250 would result in a significant number of premature deaths, or a significant number of additional heart attacks, and considerable numbers, more than 100,000 additional asthma attacks that otherwise could have been avoided. Likewise, H.R. 2681 would cause tens of thousands of adverse health effects, including the premature deaths that are suspected, and the heart attacks and additional asthma attacks that otherwise could have been avoided. The reason I didn't use EPA's numbers is I don't think EPA or anybody else has the prerogative to make a decision about how many people are going to die at a certain time. And that said, it does not mean, however, that one person is not going to die. And it does not mean that one person is not going to have asthma. And my position is one death that could be avoided is too many, and one asthma attack, if you've been around children who have it, is too many if they could be avoided. In light of these estimates, the bills appear to be nothing more than another attempt to purge any government intervention related to keeping our air clean and environment safe. Consider that these regulations the Republicans say are destroying jobs have not even gone into effect. The Boiler Act rules dealing with industrial boilers, as I, along with my colleagues, wrote to EPA, are currently in an administrative stay while the EPA reviews industry-provided data. And that's why we sent the letter during that period of time to ask them to please consider the diversity, as I continue to do, of the boiler makers in this country. We don't even know what the rules are going to look like yet, and yet the Republican gut reaction is to oppose them, or consider that the cement rules have been finalized for a year already. Most cement plants are already in compliance, and those plants that aren't are working with the EPA to get in compliance. Mr. Speaker, based on what I've seen by the Republican-led Congress, it's clear to me, it's clear that they have no intention of using their power to create jobs. My friends say that the President's administration is not about the business with the so-called, he said, Jobs Creation Act. I don't know whether it would create a single job or not, but we wouldn't know it until it passed, and it isn't going to be passing here in the House of Representatives, because the agenda that you've laid out is an agenda that's going to attack the EPA as if they are some horror show here in this country, and not an agenda, as you heard in the 1 minute this morning, and as you've heard from the Democratic leadership repeatedly. Bring up the Jobs Act, put it on the floor, let it be debated under an open rule, and to do what's necessary for us to create jobs. The history of the Clean Air Act shows that its benefits, longer lives, healthier kids, great workforce, productivity, and ecosystems outweigh the costs by more than 30 to 1. And I continue to remind my friends that the Clean Air Act was implemented under the Richard Nixon administration and has been in existence for 40 years. And this country has experienced ups and downs during that period of time insofar as its economy is concerned. And said regulations haven't caused all of the economy to collapse. Otherwise, during the period when Speaker Gingrich and President Clinton and those of us that were here balanced the budget, we wouldn't have been able to do it if the Clean Air Act was all that bad, as you all are pointing out in your continuous attack against the EPA. And in the time since the act was passed, air pollution has been reduced by more than 60%, while the gross domestic product of the United States grew by more than 200%. Furthermore, an EPA economic analysis found no indication that any cement plants would close due to the cement rules. And most analysis at this point indicated that 10 underutilized plants would go idle temporarily while waiting for economic conditions to improve. However, if we can get the economy back on track and restore demand for cement, then those plants will not have to go idle. We need to focus on creating customers and restoring demand. I heard that from my colleagues say that that's what he hears from business persons. I hear that same thing, that they need demand and that they need customers. We need to make it easier for them to do that, and not easier for the suppliers to pollute. You know what's a great way to create more demand for concrete? Invest in infrastructure projects that use concrete for roads and bridges, the very same proposals called for in the President's Jobs Act. If Republicans are so concerned with the concrete plant shutting down, you should work toward helping these businesses sell more concrete. Making it easier for them to pollute does not provide underutilized plants with new customers. In the midst of an economy still suffering the effects of the greatest recession in a generation, the only answer my friends on the other side seem to have is to dismantle any government regulation intended to protect our nation's public health and environment. This, Mr. Speaker, is economic extremism. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida.